This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. KO is in the house. That's right. I'm here with Kate O'Neill, the Tech Humanist. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
I guess, the first thing I want to ask you is how do I find what's good on Netflix right now?
You know what I think? I think the best trick to that is to go to Rotten Tomatoes first. Do you use that as a way in ever?
I don't. Tell me how that works. Like you just look something up or?
Yeah. So if you go to Rotten Tomatoes, they have a list of what's on DVD and streaming, and you can filter that by what they call their certified fresh, like the ratings that are, I think it's 70% and up. And then you can filter that by just what genre you want and exclude certain genres. So I don't want to see horror, I want to see sci-fi and whatever. And then you can really whittle it down to just kind of what you're looking for and get that sort of top set of recommendations. And that can take you into Netflix, to Amazon Prime, to Hulu, et cetera. So there you go. First actionable tip is forget trying to navigate any of these streaming programs directly. Go to the source of Rotten Tomatoes. It'll tell you exactly how good these movies are to begin with.
What great advice. Now, of course, the reason I'm asking that question is because my first real question is, tell us the Kate O'Neill story. How did you get into being the futurist and the tech queen? And then let's also talk about where this tech humanism came from. But give us the whole backstory and professional journey that brought you to your work.
Well, the tech queen, that's a term I'm going to take away from this. That appellation is going right on my LinkedIn profile. Funny thing is, I made my way into technology by way of language. So I was a German major and a Russian and linguistics undergraduate, or a minor, in my undergraduate at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And it was in the very, very, very early 90s when the web first came about. And I saw, the web when it was just a text-based browser. And the first time I ever saw a graphical browser, Mosaic, and I saw images, visuals that were actually part of the page, I got, that little sensation you get at the back of your neck when, like the tingles when something really excites you. I got that feeling and I had the sense like this is going to change everything. And of course it did. So I just knew that I had to get into that space. And I built a website for the language laboratory that I was managing at the time, which turned out to have been the first website that was built at the University of Illinois, Chicago. A guy at Toshiba in California saw it, emailed me, and recruited me to come to Toshiba and build their intranet for them, which I didn't know how to do, but I figured out because nobody else knew how to do it either. One thing led to another, and a few startups later, I was working at Netflix as one of the first 100 employees there as their first content manager, leading a team of content producers. And it was just a really wild run. The first decade or so out of college for me was just like diving in the deep end of the whole Silicon Valley experience. Huge life change and a great experience. But to be in the midst of so much innovation and so much big thought around technology at the time when it was most innovative and most kind of happening was thrilling. And then, from there's a whole other series of events, going to Portland, starting a consulting business, going to Chicago, doing more consulting, going to Nashville to pursue songwriting on the side, but then ending up back building another intranet and then building my own company and then moving to New York. It's just like, wow, this is such a crazy story. But it's had a really good, fun run over these 20 some years in technology and a lot of exposure to so many different industries and verticals as a result of it.
Wow, totally tremendous. Now, let me take you back to the good old days just for a quick second. I want to clarify something because you mentioned text-based browser, and then you also mentioned the first time I saw images.
Yeah.
So if you and I are going back to the same era, I would remind you of Gopher. Do you remember Gopher?
Right. So
Gopher had the images before the web had images.
Right. So, Gopher and Finger and Ping and all those internet tools that were available to connect to pre the web were all totally legit. And those of us who were, kind of steeped in it knew how to navigate all that stuff. But I remember thinking that the web in particular, the whole notion of a connected web of pages, of, intentionally created pages with interlinked words and ideas was really exciting and cool. And because you knew you had to be really kind of destination oriented with Gopher. Whereas the web was, as that name, kind of the metaphor implies, I don't think very many of us think about that metaphor anymore, about what the notion of the web implies, this like mesh of interconnected, like almost like a maze of things, which we all experience, but it's a really meaningful thing to me to unpack that metaphor because it's integral to a lot of the work that I do, to think about the metaphors we've taken from physical world or from our lived experiences and applied them in various ways to digital experiences, and how we can learn more about how to create meaningful experiences online from understanding those metaphors. So the web, I think, is a really interesting concept of you're supposed to get lost in it. You're supposed to like not have a destination. You're supposed to go to it with one thing in mind and then not even realize that you've gone, 10 pages later into some tangent that's taken you off down what Rotten Tomatoes recommends the best movies are.
This is exactly how my father-in-law surfs the web and Facebook. So he's 85 years old. God bless him. He cannot tell when he's on Facebook, when he's looking at an ad, when he goes off to some clickbait. So now he's on BuzzFeed. Now he's over here. Of course, he does this on his phone. He does this on his iPhone.
Wow.
Now you really can't tell what's going on and what's coming from where. And he will go down these digital rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And then he's like, yeah, did you know that there are these bath salts? And it's like, dude, what are you reading with the bath salt? Where did you end up? Where did you end up? So let's talk about human-centric digital transformation. That's one of your keynote topics. That is one of your positioning statements, that basically everything that you do is the human experience in the digital world.
Yeah.
Tell us, what are the ramifications of that? How do you talk to your clients about that? What does that mean to our day-to-day, the way that we sort of live our lives and run our businesses?
So digital transformation is this funny term, right? Like I think it's this buzzword in the business space that everybody kind of generally understands this in broad strokes. We all know that it means, we know that we need our businesses to be more technically up to speed, and that we need to invest in back-end systems or something like that. I think if you ask most executives or most business leaders, they would probably be able to come up with some kind of articulation like that. But few people are really thinking, I think, about what we're really saying when we talk about digital transformation. And to me, first of all, the term is a misnomer, because when I think about the term digital transformation, it makes me think of analog to digital, is that what you're implying the transformation is. And I picture, you remember in Groundhog Day, that alarm clock that Bill Murray keeps smashing every day when it wakes him up? That is a digital alarm clock, right? We plugged it into the wall, as opposed to an analog alarm clock that was round and it had the little jingly jangly bells on it. There's a transformation that already took place when you can plug something into a wall. Obviously, that's not what we're talking about in business when we talk about digital transformation. What we're really talking about is data. We're talking about the ability to connect one system in one place of the business to another system through data and understand in much more sophisticated terms what's happening within the business. And we can get far greater insights, get more nimble and more adaptable, and understand the market better and understand our customers better. So that's what's really happening. And I think so data transformation, it's a little late in the game to sort of change the terminology, but data transformation is really more reflective of what's happening. But the other side of what's wrong with that phrase is that it also implies, digital transformation implies that you need to think first about technology. And the reason I use the term human-centric digital transformation is that I find that the technology is exactly the wrong place to start. Where we need to think first is about what drives the business, and that has to do with people. It has to do with the people inside the organization. So even start with the leadership. Why does the leadership run this company? Why, as a founder, did you choose to start the company? What do you care about? What is the purpose that you bring with you to this company? Why does the company exist, and what is it trying to do at scale? And then you think about the people outside of the company who are interacting with the company for whatever services or products you offer. What are their needs? What are they trying to accomplish? And the more alignment you can understand between why the company exists, why you do what you do, and why the people outside the company are coming to you, that alignment is where you really need to focus that digital transformation. So the more you can spend the time and effort on building data that tells you about that relationship, the meaningfulness of that relationship, and using technology that amplifies and accelerates the results of that relationship and gets results faster to the people outside your company and results faster inside your company, that's going to bring the best outcomes for your customers and for you as a business owner and business leader.
Super quick commercial break. Isn't this interview amazing? If you'd like to get more ideas on how to start or grow your speaking business fast, pop over to our free training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. Now that sounds like a big, deep, complex topic. And I know that you have obviously a keynote and you speak at conferences and companies, both virtually and of course in person when in person is a thing. But you also do something that I think is really, really cool, which is you call it a strategy articulation workshop.
Yes.
And I've been encouraging my clients for years and years. I have a different term. I say you should lead strategic work sessions. But I like strategy articulation workshop, the way that you phrase it, even better. What is a strategy articulation workshop? And is that more of a roll up your sleeves, kind of whiteboard session, ideation, facilitation? When you go into a company and do that, what does it look like? How does it work?
It is a roll up your sleeves whiteboard sort of session. If you could see me, listeners, you would see that behind me is a gray photo paper backdrop. And the reason why that's in place is because everybody's doing video calls right now and it's covering up my whiteboard because my whiteboard has too much glare when you put lights on it. But I love my whiteboard. I'm sort of petting it behind me right now. It's like if you're a strategist, the whiteboard is your native space. And so what happens with me and my clients in these strategy articulation workshops is that we do roll up our sleeves. We sort of throw everything on the table and unpack everything and try to get down to these very essential levels about why does the business exist? What's the origin story? Like who founded it and why? What have been the big wins? What have been the things that have made people feel proud? Why do people come to work and why do they love this company as opposed to the competitors that are in the space? Let's get at that core of what even the company is about or the brand is about. Then we can try to understand what I think is the critical sense of purpose, strategic organizational purpose. And the reason why this matters in the context of human-centric digital transformation is that purpose is the shape that meaning takes in business. And meaning is a critical human construct. So humans crave meaning in everything we do. We puzzle over meaning. To the best of our knowledge, we're the only species, the only animal species that is self-aware of our own existence and that asks ourselves big questions about sort of existential, purpose and why we're here and those sorts of things, all the way down to questions of significance like, why does this matter? Why does this pen that I'm holding matter? Why does it matter that you and I are having this conversation? So those questions of why things matter are questions of meaning. And in business, why things matter are purpose questions. So why does this business matter? And when you can really understand that and articulate that in such a way that people feel it and respond to it, then you've gotten that human-centric orientation. Then you can start building out the fundamental business pieces, like understanding better how to amplify that through culture, through brand, through the experiences and interactions and touch points that you create with customers and everyone around the business. And then you can start to think about the data connections that you make throughout the business and the kinds of insights that you're bringing back. And then you can start thinking about technology that's going to amplify that, whether you're talking about automation that's going to, chatbots that are interacting with customers, or you're thinking about AI, like machine learning and algorithms that's going to help you make more informed choices and make better recommendations to customers. Whatever those pieces are, they have to start with that clear articulation of purposeful strategy. And that's what this workshop idea is supposed to be about. It's something that people can do themselves for sure. Just asking those questions is a fundamental place to start.
No, scratch that, erase that, delete that from the recording. To hire Kate O'Neill and give her lots and lots of money because she'll help you do it right.
You absolutely can hire me and pay me lots and lots of money. And I love that notion. I also think that, it's important to understand that these ideas are true whether you have me in the room or not. That I think makes them true, is that I don't have to be the one selling them. I have a canvas that I distribute when I do executive workshops that guides the executives through the process of that purpose articulation and values and priorities and brand culture, et cetera, all through what I just talked about. And they can take that back to their teams and work through that canvas. And they come back to me and they say, I can't believe the kind of conversations we were able to have as a team as a result of using this tool. And the reason is language. We start to arrive at using the same language, and that language orients the way we all think and the way we all talk about the challenges we're trying to solve and the problems that really exist in our environment. If we're not using the same language to talk about those problems, then we're going to probably have a nuance of difference in the way that we go about solving them. And so different silos start to happen within the organization. People are kind of forcing themselves against, the different problems in different ways. So just even bringing the team together to have that sort of orienting discussion gets people moving in the right direction. And at a time like this, especially when there's so much crisis and there's so much sense of panic, it's the pandemic, and when are things going to be normal again? And when is it okay to sell again? And all these kinds of big questions. I think it's a really perfect time for teams and leaders to sit down and ask themselves those big fundamental questions about why do we exist? What is it we're trying to do? What do people want from us outside the organization? And how do we find that alignment? And then how do we do everything we can to dimensionalize that alignment, to bring more value to that alignment? Because the more value we bring to that alignment, the more people are going to trust us and rely on us from outside. And the more we're going to realize that value through revenue, through retention, through all of the other really good things that happen within the organization.
So it sounds like when people come to you and they say, well, Kate, we want to talk about technology. We want to talk about future trends. We want to talk about where our customers are going. That's like a step 7. That's a step 7 question. And you take them all the way back to step 1 about why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? What are the objectives? What are the outcomes? What are the drivers? Because you can't answer questions 5 or 6 or 7 if you haven't uncovered and truly answered and agreed on questions 1, 2, and 3, correct?
Yeah, and it's a really good observation. So I feel like there's a reason why I have the book title and I'm generally referred to as the Tech Humanist. I'm going to take it back to the human pieces of this conversation. And even my keynotes typically begin with the premise of what makes humans human. We have to understand that question, that discussion, before we can begin to build on that. Business is a human construct, and we need to understand what we're bringing into it. Business creates the technology. By and large, most technology is developed through business commercialization opportunities, right? So we need to understand why business needs technology, and business is a human construct. So again, kind of flowing that human need and the human understanding through the whole thing before we can ever get to trying to figure out what is it that we want to do with technology. And then I think we can also begin to have some really interesting conversations, and we do in my keynotes and workshops, about what the opportunities with technology are. How can technology be used to solve human problems at scale, which I genuinely believe that it can. But if you start asking that question without trying to understand what it is that humans really need and what makes humans thrive, then you've missed a whole fundamental chunk of the understanding that's going to come from that type of question. So I love the opportunity to align all those pieces of business, technology, and first and foremost, humanity, like what we really bring to the picture and how we best understand ourselves and what those constructs are and what they mean.
Hey, this interview is a real moneymaker. If you're serious about ramping up your reach and revenue as a speaker, trainer, or expert, book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team. The link is doitmarketing.com/call. It will be the most valuable 45 minutes you invest in your speaking-driven business. Speaking of value, let's get back to the show. Well, I want to take, because you mentioned about our current environment, and I want to take you back, of course, to your 2016 book, Pixels and Place, that has a prescient subtitle, which is Connecting Human Experience Across Physical and Digital Spaces. Having no idea back in 2016, at least I hope you didn't have any idea about COVID-19 and the coronavirus and all of this heartbreak that we're going through right now. Are you getting more demand for Pixels in Place, where we are having these hybrid experiences and there is no just offline versus just online, and everything needs to be thought of and curated and carefully put into place, where the physical and the digital are in alignment and there's not like this jarring, weird experience that people are having when they're interacting with us or with our companies or with our brands? Tell us how that is kind of coming back and how all of that great work and all that great thinking might apply to our environment today.
Yeah, thanks. It's a really great observation. So I have actually noticed quite an increase in demand for Pixels in Place. You called it prescient, and I think that's gracious. Actually, the orientation of Pixels in Place was more toward the thought at the time was, hey, all these physical spaces exist where digital experiences are also happening. So, if you're walking through a city in a public space, there are actually digital experiences happening all around you. You are probably looking at your phone as you're walking through that space. The data that's connecting you to the other people around you and to the beacons and sensors in that space are all creating a mesh of understood realities around you. And that needs to be part of what we know about digital experience and physical experience. Like all those things need to be known together. So it's really starting from the physical and sort of bringing the digital layer on top of that and trying to understand that. But it does work, as it turns out, the other way too, to think about how do we exist in what is more the digital ether sort of space while having an understanding of what the physical world once represented to us when we did things like conferences and we had meetings in offices and when there were actually physical gatherings. What were we getting out of those experiences? What were the metaphors and what were the benefits? And how can we recreate to the best of our abilities what some of that is in the digital experiences? And also, how can we make the most of what's native to the digital space rather than trying to recreate physical metaphors in every case? If we know, for example, that within Zoom discussions, there's this opportunity to have these kind of side chats that are happening alongside whatever the primary content is, all the participants can be chatting together or, in side private conversations. And it's not a distraction per se to the primary content that's being presented. That's a whole different experience than we've tended to have in most kind of conference settings or seminar types of settings. And it's actually a pretty lovely kind of thing to be able to have that running commentary and be able to feel like you're developing some sort of community amongst the other attendees that are there. So I think there's that kind of opportunity amongst a lot of these types of virtual and digital experiences. And we just need to spend a little time, I think, unpacking them and really thinking those through. So yeah, I've started offering a workshop called Pixels in Place 2020. And so it is, kind of a revisitation of a lot of the original ideas of Pixels in Place, but, brought up to the current moment and with a lot of what happened within Tech Humanist too, which was a 2018 book, sort of bringing some of the new research that went into Tech Humanist and what's been learned since. So in the time since then, I have consulted with the city of Amsterdam on their smart city solutions. I've worked with the UN on climate change and how emerging technology can be brought to bear on reversing climate change. There's just been a lot of different types of scale of how, technology can address human challenges and how we can think in very big ways about that. So bringing that now back down to this level of how do we create these meaningful experiences with one another through the digital, online, virtual realm? I think there's a whole lot of rich vocabulary and rich opportunity there that has yet to be tapped. So I'm excited to be part of moving that forward for sure.
I'm curious that as someone who has your finger on the pulse of not only future trends, future technologies, kind of the way that we're evolving these things, and we're obviously in the speaking and consulting and training business, you and I. How do you think we're going to come out the other side of this when face to face meetings come back? And we already miss them, we love them dearly. My theory, very simplistic theory, is they are going to come back, but they're not going to come back the same. Now, when you say, well, David, how are they going to be different? I say, I don't know. Ask Kate O'Neill. So how are they going to be different? What do you see as us coming out the other side of this, knowing that we're going to be starving for human connection and breathing the same oxygen once again, which I'm looking forward to a lot? How will the meetings and training and consulting and conference industry be changed by what we've gone through right now?
Well, I think the reality is, first of all, that large conferences and events and physical gatherings won't happen until we have some combination of vaccines, antibody testing, and a confident sense of what immunity really looks like. So that should be something that I think there's level set, that no one's really trying to rush out the door on getting physical meetings to take place again until we really have some combination of those things in place. But once we do, once we have an understanding of what is safe and to bring gatherings together, I think what we are looking at is that those begin to happen, and what has been developed along the virtual space continues in parallel with physical meetings. And I think the reason is because of what we were just talking about, that there are so many opportunities to explore what's new and cool with what can be done in these formats that nobody really had spent the time investing in before. Certainly there were plenty of speakers, myself included, and probably you too, who were doing workshops through virtual, who were doing meetings through virtual, and those were happening, but there wasn't anywhere near as much urgency or near as much kind of need to get creative and to put as much emphasis on how do we get the most out of this. But now that people are doing that, and so many people are doing that, it's pretty much the only thing that's happening right now. I think there's just going to be this widespread acceptance, like, oh, there are some times when it makes sense to do things through Zoom webinar or GoToWebinar or whatever. There are reasons to do it that way. And there are reasons to have big conferences. There's an energy that happens when you can be gathered in one place. That's absolutely a totally valid thing that will happen again someday. And you and I will both be back on stage someday. We don't know exactly when, but that will happen. But I do think that it's a good recognition of the opportunity. You don't have to become, if you're a keynote speaker, if this is your business, and it is mine, my revenue for the last couple of years has been largely dominated by keynote speaking. So this is a big shift for me. And I don't believe that I want to focus on becoming a virtual keynote speaker. Like, I don't think that that's a thing that is going to make sense for me. And it doesn't make sense for a lot of my peers and colleagues either. So if that doesn't make sense for you and you're listening to this, I think that's fine. But I think it's probably to your benefit to at least dabble, at least kind of experiment and get familiar with the format, get familiar with what the ins and outs of the technology are and how you become comfortable doing something in this space, because it's going to continue. That's not going away once this is all over. You will probably be asked now and then to do webinars or whatever we're going to be calling them going forward, virtual meetings, virtual keynotes. And the expectations are going to be a little higher. Right now, the stakes are kind of low because everybody's cutting everybody some slack, that we don't necessarily know how to do large scale meetings in this format yet. But we're learning, and I think it's important that all of us who make a living as professional communicators get our hands on what the new formats are emerging to be. So there's my bit of a 2 cents on the whole thing. It's not going to change in the sense that as soon as physical meetings come back, we go back to where nobody's doing this anymore, except for those weirdo edge cases that were doing it anyway. I think this is a parallel path, so it's wise to invest in it.
I think with all love and respect, you just called me a weirdo edge case.
I think I called myself that too,
But
though.
that's okay. I will gladly accept that moniker. I'm a weirdo edge case. That's
You and
going to
I
go on
both.
my new business card.
I'm tech queen, you're weirdo edge
That's
case.
it. That is it. Well, I've got two final questions as we wrap up this awesome interview. The final question is, how do people get connected and stay connected to more Kate O'Neill brilliance? But before we get to that, my second to last question is, if folks were to take one central idea from our conversation today about tech humanism, digital transformation, all of these great things that we talked about, what would you hope that one take-home concept would be for them?
I think especially right now, in the moment that we're in with the pandemic, it's really critical for people to understand that everything comes down to humans and humanity, and that we are all in this as humans, and humans crave meaning. So the more we can do in our day-to-day, in our work, in the messages we create, the experiences we create, to put an emphasis on what is meaningful. And by meaningful, I mean what is relevant, what is purposeful, what has significance, what matters to someone. Make things meaningful, and it will pay off for you and for the people who are on the receiving end of your message.
Boom, mic drop. Now, how do people get connected and stay connected to more Kate O'Neill brilliance? We've got website, we've got blog, we've got books. Where can we send people? In the show notes directly below this episode at thespeakingshow.com. Where can we link them up? Where can we send them?
Yes. So my business website is koinsights.com. And at that website, you can find my blog, you can sign up for my email updates, etc. You can also link over to my books that are on Amazon and other fine retailers. Another way to connect with me is on Twitter at Kate O, Kateo, where I am prolific. So be warned, but I love connecting with people there. So I would love to see you in whatever social channel you enjoy.
So you must have gotten on Twitter early to get a cool handle like Kate O.
I was there pretty early. I guess it's been like 12 years now.
Wow. Very cool. Well, Kate O'Neill, thank you. This was totally awesome. We have to have you back on the show.
Thank you, David.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.